Welcome to the Marketecture podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. I'm joined today by Franchi and Mike Katz, the CEO of mParticle. Mike, thanks for being here.
Hey, good to see you guys.
And Mike, as probably everyone knows, has a long, illustrious background, including being the CEO of InterClick, that was acquired by Yahoo, and many other years and years of ad tech and martech experience. So we're very excited to hear from you.
Well, great to be here.
Some housekeeping. So Marketecture is 1 year old, which is incredible. I launched it a year ago at Programmatic I/O in Las Vegas, which I promptly got COVID at, but it was a good start otherwise. So 1 year, over 100 videos on our site, Marketecture TV. We recently launched transcripts of all of our in-depth interviews with CEOs. So if you don't have time to watch the videos, you can download a PDF of the transcript, share them with your team. It's a really good value to subscribe to that. Also worth noting that this podcast is now being published on YouTube. So you may be listening to this on your favorite podcast player, but if you prefer YouTube, we're also putting the audio only onto YouTube. We got a couple of subscribers last week as soon as we did that. All right, Mike, tell us about mParticle. I think probably a lot of people know what it is. It's a CDP. We're going to have a lot of acronyms today, but tell us about it.
Somebody called me the godfather of the CDP space.
I think that's accurate.
How do you know I'm just going to I'm fine with it, man. Who doesn't want to be the godfather?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're a 10-year-old company. I used to say we were headquartered in New York, but we're kind of everywhere. We're a remote first company for now. I think we'll probably go back to in-office environment next year, most likely. So if my CFO, David, if you're listening, I just declared it here.
All the employees are figuring this out now.
Breaking news.
Yeah, I'm just like, the convenience of remote work is great, but the sacrifice in terms of collaboration when you're trying to orient a large team towards the achievement of a common goal, like I don't think that that's the right trade-off anymore.
I think that makes sense. So we're recording this on June 1st. Yesterday, I think it was David Sachs. He had a semi-viral tweet about, effectively like RTO, right? Return to office being the new standard. And, there was, as usual on Twitter, a lot of back and forth. But I think he made some really good points where, as a organization scales, particularly for a founder, like you miss out on a lot and the organization misses out on a lot, not being together, not having, just people having that, meeting after the meeting and serendipitous connections and being able to build culture. So have you been feeling that over the course of the past couple of years? Is, basically everybody's gone either remote only or remote first.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think we built an incredible culture heading into, from 2013 to 2020. I think that it was a differentiator for us and, arguably a strategic advantage. And then that all kind of went away during the pandemic and kind of the work from home environment. And we fared well. Like we probably had some of our best quarters during the pandemic and we've continued to do well, but I feel like we've definitely lost that culture, the collaboration, the connection, community, all the C words. We were together as a company last week out in Scottsdale. So we got the entire company together for really like the first time ever. And it was just such a great reminder, one, in terms of like how many awesome people there are within the company. And then two, the importance of connection and meeting people and getting to know them and not just like treating them as this like avatar on the other side of a screen that can help you transact to solve the thing that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, we had Jay Friedman from the Goodway Group here, and he spoke at length about the fact that his company has always been 100% remote, well before COVID. And I think the lesson really is that you have to be intentional about what you're doing. You can't just throw everything to chance and hope people come to the office. You kind of need to have a policy, need to have a culture, and support it.
I completely agree. I think like when people point to like the Amazon culture, I think what underpins that strong execution there is the level of intentionality, and businesses are just systems, right? And you do need to be intentional about the way that you drive the alignment of information and incentives and processes and the way that people show up with whatever the goal is.
Right.
So I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I think the reason people reacted poorly to David Sachs' pronouncement is because, like everything he says, it's largely uninformed and very confident. But let's get back to CDPs.
He's a dick too. I'll go on record.
He's a dick. All right, we are on record. I think he's a dick too. Eric, do you think he's a dick?
Not. Yeah, I'm not a fan.
I love putting Eric on the spot. I'm gonna have to click the not NSFW button in Spotify because of this conversation. Okay, no one wants to hear our opinions on this. Let's go to CDPs. I want to hear about data. Talk about data.
Hold on, before we get into it, just disclosure: I'm a personal investor in mParticle, and thank you, Michael, for allowing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the support really from Day Zero.
Yeah, and I asked Mike for an investment in beeswax, and he turned me down. So we're all disclosed.
I did. I definitely did. Although I don't know if I said no. I think I may have just ghosted you, which is probably worse.
Yeah, I think that's
it was ad tech. I don't know. It was just a dumb mistake. My bad. If I could take it back, I would.
I bet.
So CDPs. What can I tell you guys?
What is a CDP? Why is everything dead? Like, okay, this is my problem with CDPs. Is like, ever since you became the godfather of CDPs, I read article after Substack after Medium about things being dead. DMPs are dead, CDPs are dead, reverse ETL is dead. I don't even know what that is. I want to find out what reverse ETL is. I got an email, a blind email from some salesperson saying composable CDPs are the new thing. I don't know what that is. Help me.
Yeah, there's a lot. Everybody loves the fill in the blank is dead statement. Like I made that statement about DMPs, I think back in, I think it was 2017.
It was at Ad Exchanger. I remember that.
Yeah, programmatic IO. So it was like in January to start the year. And I think like I pissed off a lot of people, but I've gone back to that presentation and I think I made a bunch of compelling points, which, with the benefit of hindsight have turned out to be true. When folks are talking about like the death of the CDP, one, I think it's just marketing. They're trying to get headlines. Claiming the death of something is kind of like claiming you've crossed the chasm. Like it doesn't work that way. You have to actually like earn that. You have to have like a unique perspective on where the future's going. Now, the companies that are talking about the death of the CDP, they themselves are the same ones who are now talking about the composable CDP, or as you called it, the compostable CDP.
I added a T in there and changed the meaning.
Yeah. It's so much better. The compostable CDP is definitely, look, there's an important trend that's happening. And that is the cloud data warehouse is becoming almost like the universal data store within most organizations, most technically sound, somewhat data mature organizations, right? And that shift now changes things for every application that has built like a proprietary data store. For us as a CDP, like if we kind of step back, the value that we've created was never in the storage of data. Like nobody puts data into a CDP just to leave it there. So it's never about data at rest. It's always about data in motion. So the intelligent movement of data is where the value is created. That's what the market has assigned our job to be done as. And that's ultimately what people are buying. Now, in doing so, for us at mParticle, we've created a number of different services or applications that sit on top of our data store. These are things like data quality protection, privacy and compliance enforcement, insights and analytics, segmentation and journeys, being able to do like transformations, things like that. And whether that sits on top of our proprietary data store or a more universally adopted data store, whether that's Snowflake or BigQuery or Redshift or Databricks, like it shouldn't matter because that's not, to focus on that misses the point entirely. I think of us as this business logic layer almost this customer decision engine that helps our customers assign truth to their data, understand the meaning behind their data, and then make it easy to connect that data.
So, from a layman's perspective, my understanding of these, what is dead, what is not dead, is DMPs were primarily anonymous data and cookies, third-party cookies, etc. And they were supposed to solve all the data problems of the world, but in fact, they're pretty much their only use case was media buying and media optimization. And as cookies went away, they died. True or false? Do you agree or disagree with that characterization?
I completely agree. I think DMPs told a great story around something bigger than paid ad targeting, but they never evolved into anything more. And then with the rise of mobile, so this was like the other trend that was really disruptive, the rise of mobile and the app store. Like there is no such thing as like pixels and cookies inside app environments. Everything had to move towards an API based setup, and architecturally they weren't built.
Yeah, I remember I was at AppNexus and O'Kelly asked me to like kind of do a little investigation of the DMP space because he used to always say like, I don't even know what it is. I don't know what a DMP is. Anyway, he didn't sound like an old Borscht Belt Jewish comedian when he said that, but he did. And and I went out and I talked
worse.
Yeah, he was yelling. And so I went out to all the DMPs. I just met with the CEOs and I was amazed. And this is like 2011, maybe. I was amazed at how cookie oriented they were. They had no story on mobile. They were like, oh yeah, mobile's coming, we care, but like it was cookies. So I don't think it was surprising that what used to be a DMP is dead. I think there are some companies like Lotame that are still doing really well in the ad tech niche.
But yeah, well, actually, this is a question for Mike. Why is it such a durable category, the DMP, particularly on the publisher side? Like, I mean, if you look, basically they all have either their legacy DMPs or some of the newer ones like a Lotame or a Permutive. They don't seem to go away. Like, why is it such a durable thing on the pub side? Any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, there's two things. Like, one, categories, they persist long after somebody calls their death, right? Like, it doesn't just like happen the day of. DMPs have become like pretty firmly entrenched in a bunch of organizations, and they create business processes around those solutions, and it's tough to change. Like, there's this inertia that ends up setting in. You also have like, there is a continuum of technology buyers, and so towards the end of life in terms of any market adopting new technology, like you do have laggards still hanging on because they're just not quick to adopt new tech trends. And the other kind of big point is that, as Ari mentioned, DMPs were fine in a cookie-based, completely anonymous world. And still, a bunch of media companies, even the ones that have now started to embrace subscription or transaction-based business models, they still do have a bunch of anonymous traffic.
Yep.
And so I think that there is a place for those solutions, although I do think that it's finite. Like they won't persist in their current state.
Yeah, I was just actually quoted in Ad Exchanger last week about the launch of ArcSpan, which is a publisher-oriented DMP, because that use case of organizing anonymous data and selling against it still exists and is a valid use case. Let's move on to reverse ETL. What the hell is reverse ETL? Let me tell you once again what I think it is. I think it's like they're saying CDPs are all about distributing data to partners, but what if you just had your own database on Snowflake and then could push data out when you wanted to? Is that what a reverse ETL is? Or was that what the sales pitch is?
Yeah. So their sales pitch is like, hey, you already have all your data in your data warehouse, which is directionally correct for some organizations. What it ignores is the state of data quality. And inside most organizations, the data that sits in their data warehouse is pretty messy. And there's no worse approach than just to assume like, hey, I'm gonna get started faster, so there's a faster path to value realization, than saying like, hey, let me just kind of tap into this like swamp of a data lake or data warehouse. So yes, what reverse ETL is then when I was describing the different services and applications that we offer, it is the segmentation and activation capabilities without really like everything else. So it's when you think about it that way, right? Remove where the data is coming from or what the data store is. It's a stripped down, very incomplete CDP.
Right.
So the irony in all of this is that the companies that want to be CDPs started to claim that the CDP was dying, right? And
Yeah.
it hasn't. And if anything, now everybody's a CDP. And it's been really interesting to see the evolution of this category, because like at InterClick, we were a late entrant into a super crowded space, and we were undercapitalized relative to probably everybody except, Eric and Mike at Undertone. But like we out executed folks. And then it was like at mParticle, we were like the first. We're like, oh, this is all white space. And it's been fun to see it kind of come, as far as it has, where now like everybody's a CDP. And I used to have to convince people that they had these problems that they weren't even aware of. And now people are buying CDPs without even understanding how they're going to use it.
Yeah, there's so many companies that claim to be CDPs. Really, anyone who had data just put out a press release the last 10 years that they're really a CDP.
Totally.
Okay, composable CDPs. I literally have no idea. I couldn't even guess what this would be or what's it claimed to be.
Yeah, so if you break down the CDP into a number of components, and I'm going to kind of paint this in somewhat broad strokes, you have the data collection piece, you have the data storage part, you may have capabilities like the ones I mentioned around observability or data quality, you may have some like privacy and compliance tools, and then you have like the connectors, right? So, kind of simply put, what it looks like is one vendor to collect your data and to send it to the data warehouse. The data warehouse being the system of data storage. And then there's usually a tool like a reverse ETL tool that does the one service or one application around audience segmentation and like the syndication of those audience segments.
Right.
So that's all it is. It's a subset. Well, it's a fragmented, disjointed subset of what like a purpose-built system can do.
Right. That sounds great. That sounds like a great solution.
Yeah. The workflows are easy.
So a lot of people admire you for the basic reason that you were able to escape ad tech. So I've personally tried. I'm still trying. What's it like on the other side? You're not in ad tech anymore. You're in sort of MarTech. What's it like on the other side? Are there parts of ad tech you miss? I guess I'd love to hear your riff on that.
Yeah. I mean, ad tech is fun because it's fast paced. The people are entertaining, like all that. Like I and not to
No,
say
true.
that, like, yeah, that to me was like always the best part of it. And I think we built an incredible team and an incredible culture at InterClick. I was just never passionate about the go to market, like selling to agencies.
Yep.
I was never in love with that. And so it took me a while. I found that it's taken us, when we hire people that I know and trust and have been high performers for me in the past at companies like InterClick or Yahoo, it's taken them a long time to acclimate from ad tech to marketing tech, primarily because not only is the go-to-market so different, they actually have to unlearn a lot of the behaviors that made them successful in ad tech, because those same behaviors will make you incredibly unsuccessful in marketing tech.
Like what? I want to hear some.
The undisciplined nature of like chasing down an opportunity and basically begging them to give you a test budget, like that doesn't exist in any industry other than ad tech. Like that is not real go to market. Like you have to understand business problems and opportunities and what their KPIs are and what their existing systems are that they have in place, and if they're a qualified buyer and how they think about their, like in our case, data architecture, and you're uncovering landmines along the entire like buyer journey. And in ad tech, what are you doing? You're getting people to a bar, or to a nice restaurant, or a concert, or a store, and you're kind of like bribing your way to a test budget.
Right. And the big difference is that in ad tech, people are spending money. They're already spending money, and the goal of the ad tech vendor is to skim a little bit of that money in exchange for some value add. In MarTech, there may not be a budget. You may be creating new budget, or you may be creating new challenges for the customer that they were looking to solve. It's a pretty different sales process.
Yeah. I think like one aspect of ad tech that I would say is transferable is like the importance of relationship building. But I think in marketing tech, the relationship building is like one aspect of go-to-market success. It's not the only aspect.
Yeah.
And so, the budget thing is very real. The other part of that, and like it's tangentially related, it's like in enterprise software sales, the best outcome is you go through this long sales process and you win the deal. The second best outcome is that you qualify out the opportunity super fast, as soon as like one conversation, so that you're not chasing and chasing and chasing. But in ad tech, it kind of like you're rewarded for the chase. Like you don't always have to win people over right away. You just kind of have to wear them down, at least in my experience.
I don't know about that, but like I think it's more once again, I'm quoting O'Kelly twice in one call, which is like he's always caught hanging around the hoop. Just like if you're there enough, they see your face enough, someday they're like, hey, you could have this budget. Sure. I have a feeling I could use you at some point.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's what I meant by wearing them down, not just like showing up at their desk and standing over them and being like, please, please, please. It's that. It's much more subtle.
Well, we've heard about how Eric shows up at your doorstep trying to sell you an IO. That was from about 4 episodes ago. If you were listening to that one, that was amusing.
I didn't hear that.
Remember the work from home conversation? Well, he didn't. He took it literally and tried to sell an IO at someone's kitchen.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. You can't knock the hustle. It worked. Yeah, good. That's all that matters.
Yeah, but I do think that's an interesting point around, the pace, right? Like, ad tech has transactional businesses, and then they've got, I think, more sort of enterprise businesses as the business has evolved. But if you're in one of those transactional businesses, I think, to your point, number one, if you're, sort of aligned with and geared for that faster pace of business, you can make a lot of things happen, right? Because you can just be out, and activity can drive outcomes to a degree. And then I think to Ari's point, it makes sense, right? Like, you're tapping into existing budgets, or you can try to tap into, sort of an existing budget pool, which allows for, again, the sort of faster pace and feedback loop. Whereas with what you're talking about, Mike, you might need to create like an entire category, which can take a heck of a lot of time, right? It's far more complex.
Yeah. It resembles very traditional enterprise sales versus this like fast paced, definitely more exciting transactional based go to market.
Yeah, definitely more exciting. I mean, there's no doubt that you're going to have a better time at an ad tech party than a MarTech party.
Definitely.
I don't even know if MarTech exists. Like, ad tech is a thing. Ad tech is a thing. We all interoperate. We all know each other. It all kind of makes sense. MarTech ranges from what you do as a CDP, very high data, high complexity, to, services that just post on your social networks and track the results, to email, to, it's just like a whole bunch of SaaS solutions doing all kinds of stuff that don't necessarily have much in common with each other.
Yeah, these MarTech market maps that you see sometimes, they're like, 10x the number of logos than the Lumascape, 20x, 50x. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, the heterogeneity across the marketing tech industry, I think, is much greater than ad tech. Like, I think there was a Twitter exchange about this, but like I feel like most of the innovation within ad tech has kind of come down to like ad serving, basically. Whereas in marketing tech, sure, you have like CDPs and data platforms, you have customer engagement tools and marketing automation, and then you have like a number of specialists within that bucket. You have like 8 different types of analytics products. You have the customer support tools like Zendesk and a bunch of others. And those companies look and feel and talk very, very differently. And I'm ignoring, the vast majority of it, but that, I think paints a little bit of a picture.
So I've heard this story before, but I'd love if you could quickly tell us how you managed to get the hip hop star Nas on your cap table.
You mean Nas? But yes,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Nas. I mean, tomato.
Yeah. Not a hip hop fan, Ari. I take it.
Yeah.
So
I saw the Taylor Swift show this weekend. That was really mind blowing.
That counts. So I know Franchi is. So yeah, I mean, I'll give you the super abbreviated version of it, but I was on my way to Cannes, which is actually coming up in a few weeks. I was on my way there with my brother. This was 2013. So we had already sold InterClick. We were fully departed from Yahoo, and it was like, hey, let's get on the ground. Let's have some meetings. Let's talk about the new company. And we were waiting for a flight. I saw him, and like my brother and I were like talking, and my brother's not like a huge hip hop fan, but he likes it. And so I was like, oh my God, that's Nas. And he's like still talking like, okay, what's our first meeting? He's like trying to game plan and be like the responsible one of the two of us. And I'm like, no, this is a pretty cool moment. And so, for me, I don't ever really think about like talking to anybody when I'm traveling, even if I'm traveling like with my brother or like my best friend, or whoever, right? Like if I'm on a plane, headphones are in, trying to sleep, and I'm just relaxing. So whatever, he ends up sitting next to us, and as we deplane in Paris, we end up connecting and talking and exchanged information and hung out a little bit that week. And I didn't even realize at the time that he did any angel investing, and introduced me to his business manager, who's become a good close personal friend of mine, a guy named Anthony Saleh. And they invested a few weeks later, and it was pretty cool for us, because I think we were one of the first companies back in the day to have like a celebrity investor. Right. Now you see like everybody's seed round, it looks like a Coachella poster. We're like, it's all celebrities. But I feel like we were the first, or like we were definitely one of the first. And like I always want to be the first. I want to do things different. I want people to feel like, you know what? The first time I thought about that, the first time I saw it, the first time I heard it, that came from MK.
Has he been a value add investor?
I think for sure. I mean, he spoke at our first conference our first like user conference back in 2015. I want to say, and then had like an incredible performance that night. And it's all about brand building for one, creating great experiences that the community that you're trying to sell into want to be a part of. But then also just like seeing the way that he carries himself has definitely it's motivated me and inspired me to continue to grow and improve as a person.
Awesome story. So to get it straight, it's Nas at Cannes, not Nas at Con. Keep it all straight.
Twisted.
All right, let's take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, and we'll come back with the news of the week. So, interesting news this week. Let's talk Twitter first. We love talking about Twitter. There was some news the Digiday broke that Twitter would be rolling out some programmatic buying on its platform via InMobi. So presumably the InMobi DSP will be able to buy Twitter ads on the Twitter app using programmatic pipes, which is sort of interesting because of the long history of walled gardens. I mean, is this desperation because they just need the revenue, or is this a real change of some kind?
I don't know. They didn't comment on it.
Right.
So, and there's also, I don't know if it was like actually announced or anything like that. I think somebody saw something in like an ads.txt file, if I read the article correctly. But yeah, I mean, they need to monetize, right? Like, they've got I think a lot more DR centric advertisers on the platform today, right? So, that's a lot of what we're seeing now. You've got the Linda Yaccarino hire that's, clearly designed to drive a lot more of the brands hopefully back to the platform. Hopefully, obviously, if you're sort of a fan of Twitter or work there, but tapping into all of the programmatic budgets out there is a no-brainer. It's the low-hanging fruit. So I'm not surprised. I'm just wondering if this is it, or if it's like the first step in really trying to aggressively move into programmatic, which for them should be a no-brainer and should be a substantial part of the biz.
And I think it's a little bit of a deep cut, but I think they announced something with Turn like 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago, that Turn was able to bid into Twitter, but it then fizzled. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember exactly. I think it's also noteworthy that, there's no real reason why a walled garden can't let people bid in.
Exactly.
You could protect the user privacy. You don't need to send the IP address. You don't need to send the user ID. I think the platforms don't want to do it, mostly because they're so powerful they don't need to, but Twitter's not.
I mean, I think I very much agree with what you said. Like, it's I was actually surprised that they didn't already support this pretty broadly. So if this is something that's new, I feel like it's kind of long overdue.
Another news item was that WPP and NVIDIA announced a partnership to build AI-enabled content engine for digital advertising. That's what they're calling it. It's built on NVIDIA Omniverse. I'm not an expert in NVIDIA products, so it's a little bit hard for me to say. But but it's kind of interesting just because they're two company names you wouldn't expect to be in this announcement. WPP because they're an agency and generally don't create new tech products, and NVIDIA because they're infra, and I don't think of them as sort of an application layer company. And I'm sort of at a loss as to what to say about this.
Well, I think it's so NVIDIA is the hottest company in the world right now, right?
Yep.
Like they became I think $1 trillion company after
They did, yeah.
that incredible run over the course of the past week or so. And everybody's talking about it. I think trying to catch up in terms of what they do, right? The CPU versus the GPU. So it's very much a company to be partnered with in this moment. So there's probably the motivation there. On the other side of this is this desire for everyone to have an AI story, a generative AI story. So, if you read the release, and it's a little hard to follow, there's a couple of things. It's to your point, there's not an application layer. So they're going to be working with, I think, Adobe in some way to help make this a reality. And then number two, the thing that I thought was, a little strange, but maybe not, is that this seems to be actually like, generative AI for metaverse applications, which is surprising because that's probably such a small segment of the work that they do for customers, and certainly not where I think a lot of the value to be gained with the generative AI stuff when it comes to creative.
Yeah,
So it was a little bit of a head scratcher in terms of hard to figure out, leading towards the metaverse as the first use case. But I think it's also not surprising. Again, I think it's a cool company to be partnered with for any agency.
Yeah, it's definitely a headline press release, but you need this press release is like an LSAT logic problem. You read it a couple times to try to, what do they actually say?
Yeah, I mean, on the other side of it, the real work that's being done on the generative stuff, which we talked about last week with the big ad platforms, I think that's where the real interesting stuff is. And then ultimately how the non-walled garden opportunity starts to emerge. That's where I'm spending a lot of time. That's where I think the real opportunity is.
I mean, look, NVIDIA, like they're a beast, because they're at like the center of every kind of major tech hype cycle, because of where they sit so foundationally in the stack, whether it's like gaming, cloud computing, the Web3 nonsense from a couple of years ago, now AI. And I think WPP as an agency holding company. I think like they have smart enough executives to know that if nothing else, that's a good wagon to kind of hitch their horse to, or a good horse to hitch their wagon to, depending on how you look at it. And I would take the under on anything actually materializing it from that announcement.
Yeah, hey, we're talking about it here, so the press release was successful. On this topic, I'd love to hear. Everyone's talking about generative AI for creative and all of these sort of somewhat obvious applications. But what are you hearing from your customers around the impact of AI on their use of data?
Lots of different types of AI. Do you mean just are we talking about generative specifically or predict?
Well, yeah, I'd be interested in just what you're hearing from your customers, because you're probably pretty plugged into sort of a group of marketers that maybe I don't hear from regularly.
Yeah, the part of AI that we've been focused on for the good part of a year and a half is around building predictions. And so we acquired a company last year called Fedora, and they had built out a bunch of machine learning pipelines. And for us, it was always about the setup, right? So what I mean by that is, we talked about this earlier, but mParticle started as a mobile data solution because we felt like that would be the setup to solve the multi-channel, omni-channel data challenges. We felt like when we had made enough headway on that front, that would serve as the foundation for solving the intelligence and automation that could help, hopefully, like up-level the utilization of first-party data. And so in doing so, we in 2022, we actually bought a couple companies. So the first one was Indicative, which is a customer journey analytics tool, which allows our customers to contextualize the customer journey, understand the why behind the what, see where there's like leverage or maybe weakness within any of the different like paths to conversion. And then we bought a company called Fedora, which built a bunch of machine learning pipelines so that our customers could predict what may happen. So you have a continuum of insights from kind of backwards looking what happens type questions to forward looking what do we predict or what may happen type questions. And so the things that our customers want to be able to do, they want to drive more engagement, they want to prevent churn, they want to drive scale through lookalike models, they want to understand the impact of certain events or certain signals on the outcomes of campaigns or various personalization initiatives. So they're oftentimes doing uplift modeling, and so that's the nature of the conversations that we're having. We're starting to experiment with generative AI as a bit of like an overlay to some of the reports that we're able to provide. So think of like an assistant that kind of sits on the side of the screen that can provide an explanation of various trends or charts that we're displaying, and so I think the early signs, like it's cool. We're able to do it in a way where it's like it's aggregated. There's no like privacy or consent issues, but I'd say like the confidence interval across like many of these insights that are produced is highly, highly variable. So you kind of have to preface a lot of the results that are being provided with some sort of mechanism to kind of temper the confidence or to temper the expectations.
Right. So really at the application layer is where you're seeing the generative AI being used.
Yeah, campaigns, right? To automate the creation of text, maybe the creation of media or graphics. I think like the generative AI thing, I'm going to have like a little bit of a contrarian take than most. Like, I think it's cool. And I do think that AI will be the catalyst for the next bull market very broadly. But I think that generative AI, the main application as of right now, and kind of what everybody's talking about, is like it helps people avoid a cold start problem.
Right.
So like generating the first few lines of text for a campaign, or creating the bones of a speech, or like a manuscript, or like whatever it may be. But that first iteration always kind of sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives you like a starting point, because if you've ever had to write anything or create anything, the hardest part is like starting with that blank canvas. So I think of it as an incredibly valuable mechanism to accelerate into whatever process that you're undertaking. But TBD if it's going to be much more than that.
Where then do you see the opportunity? You mentioned it's potentially the catalyst for the next bull market, and just total sidebar. Like, you've been writing more about macro topics, which I think has been really cool to see from you in terms of like ZERP and hyperinflation and all of that stuff. Like, where as a CEO of a big business and trying to think through like market downturns, market acceleration, where do you think we are in terms of like the cycle? Broadly speaking, right? In terms of just like macro and the market and bull versus bear, and where do you think things go in the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, with like the ZERP era, I think it fueled a lot of bad behavior, a lot of stupid stuff. Like the entire Web3 thing, I think is a great example. I think closer to my world, like the rise of like the data engineer making all of the decisions for the business, I think is another example where like companies just became really, really undisciplined about focusing on building real businesses, and people just started buying tools because they could, and storing data because they could, and doing whatever. Like they ran amok. And with higher interest rates, like the ability to raise more money has like the dynamics have fundamentally shifted, right? Like the bar is much higher. You actually have to build a real business, which means that a lot of the stupid stuff has started to and ultimately will go away, right? And so that's good. That's a positive reset. It's about the old school days of interclick and undertone, when we had to build real business, because if we didn't, we wouldn't exist, right? Like that's what we're all kind of getting back to. Now, I think the role of AI on a go forward basis, I think, like I was saying before, I don't know if it fully removes some of the barriers to entry, but I think it reduces the friction that exists maybe naturally when you are starting from a cold start. And kind of the coldest start is like day zero of building any company and any business. Through intelligence and automation, I feel like it's going to accelerate and up-level the businesses and the opportunities that people pursue. And the backstop of that is that it has to be real.
Yeah, I think the point I was going to make was that that cold start problem helps a lot with things like starting a new business. There's all these demos about ChatGPT being able to create new websites, but it's not going to create a production scaled website. It's going to create your prototype you could show to an investor or potential customer, which gets you there much, much faster. Or writing a book, or writing a children's book, having for placement only kind of images. Those things are huge improvements versus starting from a blank piece of paper.
Agreed. Yeah. Amen.
So on that, let's call it. So this has been a amazing conversation. Just one note that next week we are recording Marketecture podcast live at the ID5 on the Road Summit on Tuesday. So if you're there, come say hello. We'll still publish at the same time next week on Friday morning. But Mike Katz, thank you so much for being here. This was a great conversation.
Absolutely. I actually have one final question for you guys.
Okay.
Go for it.
Would you call this a great podcast or the greatest podcast?
We were ranked the #1 podcast in ad tech by a totally scientific Twitter poll.
No, MK is asking about this podcast, right?
This one right here.
Oh yeah, this is the best ever.
It's definitely the best this week, no doubt.
Yeah, no, we jumped. we jumped around to a lot we jumped around to a lot of good topics, right? RTO, the macro, ad tech versus martech. This is a little bit more wider ranging.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was fun. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.